Welcome back to the Contacts Coaching Podcast. We are joined today by Shane Stent, graduate assistant in men's volleyball at Menlo College, and also master's candidate in sports performance psychology, which is being put to work in his collegiate coaching role. Appreciate you jumping on today, Coach.
Of course. Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Let's do it. Let's dive in. Take us through your background as a coach, as an athlete, what the process was like for landing your first job, any
Yeah.
subsequent jobs, any pivots along the way that we're now back in grad school years later.
Yeah.
Given what we just talked about, you are my age, so back in school at 50 plus. I love that for you. But take us through the journey, Coach.
It was exactly 10,000 days from my last class at Davis until standing in front of a class at Menlo College. Yeah, it was a pivot. It was a gap, but rewinding the clock a little bit. High school, went to Menlo School, started the boys volleyball team there for my junior and senior year there, and then went to Foothill College here locally, played 2 years of college volleyball there, and then went up to Davis, played my junior season, and then my senior season, first match of the year. Very end of the match, we were winning. I go out to block on the left, guy comes under the net and breaks my leg in three. So yeah, a ghastly injury, and that
Just
was
because like
that.
you landed on him and it snapped, or what? How does that even work?
So I moved out to the left, jumped up, landed on one leg, and he came under and landed right next to me. And then all my momentum was going left, and my foot was stuck to the ground. And I remember the sole of my foot being perpendicular to the ceiling and went down. And I remember talking through the athletic trainer, poor kid, just saying, "Hey, we're going to need an ambulance here. You can't fix this." And got real calm. And a couple surgeries later, everything was fine. But that was a pretty major pivot. And that sort of threw me into coaching, to be honest. Moved up to Idaho, still had a big passion for the sport. Moved up to Idaho, coached club there for a few years and high school up there. And then eventually, after some time, I was living over in Portland, chased my wife up there, living up in Portland, worked at Nike in sports marketing up there, and then came back to the San Francisco Bay Area to raise our family. My wife played at Northwestern. She had a full ride there for volleyball. You would have thought that the two of us would have had a volleyball in my daughter's hands like when she was first born, but it took a while. Not until she was 13 did she express any interest, and she got into it there. And her coach at the time, international guy from Italy, and he lost his visa. So the team was given to somebody else who had three teams at the time. So director and I started talking, and I jumped in there and still remember that first day. And kind of another full circle moment was that our first practice was at Menlo College, where I'm at now.
And this was the club team that you took over, not
This
school
was
team.
not school team. This was my daughter's club team. Coach and I, the director and I had a lot of talks about coaching your daughter's team can be tough, can be wrought with danger, tons of danger out there in terms of just the perception of it. But we got through it. We did great. We went from 14s to 18s with the club as a head coach. During that time, I was assistant coaching on a couple of different younger age club teams. We won a medal at USAV Nationals. Also coached some high school at that time. Stumbled into a JV job, did well there, and then moved up to varsity to assist with him. After my daughter's 18th season, I stayed on to coach one more year. There was an athlete that I really wanted to coach and got the opportunity to coach her and built a great team around her and my wife and son, because my daughter was at Bowdoin College. They were gracious enough to allow me to pursue that. After that year ended, I knew that coaching was in me and knew that coaching was a big bug that I had. So just was poking around the internet, found a master's program a mile and a half down the street, called their program director, and he talked me through the program and said, "Hey, there's an opportunity for you to be attached with the men's team." And I was like, "All right, that sounds cool." Went in and talked to the coach, and that worked out. And it was the same season that they were moving up into the MPSF, playing Stanford, playing Pepperdine, playing big schools. Walked into that gym with a pretty big lack of confidence, to be perfectly honest, because going from club into collegiate volleyball and going from girls into men who were towering over me was a bit overwhelming at the beginning. Just stayed in the fight and really had a great season. Ended up coaching the setters and the offense for the whole season and going back to year number two coming up in the fall.
Awesome. I love that. Let me ask a couple follow-up questions. You said
Yes,
that
sir.
you were helping with JV at a high school level, varsity assistant. Assuming that was your daughter's school, and then also it looks like you coached a little bit of high school in Idaho. What schools were those? What was the circumstances, scenarios, just briefly, so I have a little more info.
Yeah, absolutely. So in Idaho, it was Wood River High School. In Haley, the coach there was Ramey Goodwin, and he was great. He was my first volleyball mentor, my first kind of coach mentor, and really worked me through with assisting him and then coaching in club up there. Really enjoyed that experience. And then, yes, Menlo School, where my daughter went, coached the JV team. She was on the varsity at that time, and then coached her for her last year, and then stayed on for another one.
Got it. So that was at Menlo School, which for those people that are listening, essentially shares a campus with the college
Yes, dear.
in
Yes.
certain crossover areas, but it's like next door. Okay, that's
It's
helpful.
next door. I went to high school at Menlo, and the college was always very separate. There was nothing in common. We played in their gym, but that was about it.
Yep. And that at that time, Menlo School was a very different school than it is now, especially from an athletic standpoint, as
Oh
they
my
have
gosh.
climbed the ladder in a variety of ways.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, let's dig into this.
Yes, sir.
I would love to know from your take as
Yep.
a collegiate athlete, as a guy that has spent an inordinate amount of time coaching club and also high school, I would love your take on both of those environments. And I need to preface this by saying I think the youth sports industrial complex is destroying athletics. I wish all the clubs would implode and go away. But I also understand that there is a means to an end. I also understand that it gets kids extra reps. I just don't always think that the student is put at the center of the equation there like they are in education-based stuff. So I would love
Yep.
to just get your take on what's it like coaching club? How does it contrast with coaching high school?
Yep.
What are your takeaways on that in the whole landscape that we now live in?
So being that guy that mentions back in my day, we played soccer, then basketball, then baseball. And if you were lucky, your school had a football team. So we got to do a variety of different stuff. And then in the summer, told go get outside. Now the kids go from high school tryouts in August, and as soon as the last ball drops in high school, you start your club practices, and then
Well,
club
wait,
go.
don't forget they do club tryouts in the end of August before high school even starts now.
This is true. Yes, it's gone backwards, and so it just gets so heavy. Now to finish out the year, they're doing nationals right now, and then there's a little pause, little tiny pause, and then open gyms start for club tryouts, and then we roll right in. And my take on it is that it's tough. I feel like it's the train's gone down the tracks. It's going to be hard to get back because now people are seeing playing in college. Now people are seeing that track. So they feel if she's doing it, I need to do it. And that is hard. Coaching 18s, these kids came in and they're beat up. You're getting shoulder injuries and you're passing on, at times you're passing on broken athletes to colleges, and college athletic training rooms are filled with kids with just chronic stuff. Now, I will say that I think some of the training is helping that, but yeah, it's a lot on the kids. Really a lot.
So give me your take on your high school and college coaching
Yes.
relative to club in regards to where the emphasis is, how it's
Yep.
different. Like I always joke that club is a very selfish endeavor that you should be about yourself, and the high school teams you're playing for the name on the front, right? Or the college, right? So it's a little bit
I
of a
like that.
different agenda
I like that.
because while some of these clubs create culture and they got the social post and they're going to the national and they're traveling, whatever. But at the end of the day, like they're not all married to that group like you are at your high school or your college. And so I'm
No.
just curious, as a coach, how do you approach it differently knowing that type of stuff?
So high school was a definite challenge in the sense that that's kind of your first, a really cool foray into the student athlete, right? You have to make sure that that student athlete is taken care of. I had kids that would come in front of me with tears in their eyes saying, sorry, coach, I can't make practice because I have this test coming. You just have to, hey, it's okay. Like they don't want to disappoint you. And unfortunately, what that means to me when I would see that is that there have been coaches in the past who have been hard on those kids. Oh, yeah, you got go do your academics. You're not going to start, or laying on the guilt trip a little bit, and that's hard because these kids have so much pressure on them, especially at a school like where I was coaching. Like that academic load is real. It's heavy.
And to your point, that's like my school. We're in the
Yeah.
same wheelhouse as Menlo, which is
Yep.
very different than coaching where I was in Sacramento at a big public school where the load is not the same.
So it's hard to have those conversations. I think, to be honest, hard in the sense that I think my daughter going through the process at the same time as me in my second kind of reboot of coaching, I got to see her at home being upset over academics. And so that kind of changed my lens a little bit to say, hey, I get it. You're okay. Stay on top of your stuff. But you also have to play that role of, hey, this is what life throws at you. So you got to stay up on it. And I had more interactions later that were like, especially in club, where it was like, hey, yes, you have academics, but you got stuff to do here. If you want to play at the next level, you're going to have to learn how to balance that stuff. And the way you do that is you got to stay ahead of it. And you got to have also, to segue into club, you got to have that partnership with the parents to say, hey, we both have to work at this together and keep that kid engaged and keep that kid going forward in terms of the academics and make sure that they're balanced and making sure they're not getting overrun. Because like with my 18s year, you got kids that are going through applications and testing and all sorts of different stuff. And like we went again to roll it back to when we were playing sports, like sports was over and then it was done until the next day, but it's nonstop,
No doubt.
nonstop.
No doubt. Okay, let's dig back into the past. So, when you
Yes, sir.
first became a head coach, either in the club or at the high school space, even with your extensive background, what did you realize you needed to figure out, right? And then whatever other steps along the way as well when you first took over the club. Oh, I thought I was prepared, but this is surprising that I have to deal with this. I'm always curious for our audience, right? You don't always
Yep.
think about, I'm going to go coach basketball. And as a head coach, about 15% of your time is spent coaching basketball. The other
Yep.
85% are
Yep.
doing other things. So
Yep.
always trying to figure out some of these things to prepare people for what's coming.
So the biggest thing was my lack of communication at the beginning. I had the thoughts in my head. I knew, especially like with playing time, there'd be kids that I would either have the conversation with the kid, but not deep enough so they understood. But I was always about trying to protect, I'm still about trying to protect that player. Like I'm not going to put them in an intense match at the end and have them experience failure and then have that failure really impact their confidence, because that can really happen, right? So something that I didn't think about was dealing with the parents. It's a customer service job. You need to make sure that they're happy. I had a kid that always showed that she was close but wasn't quite there, and I told her like, "Hey, I'm going to get you going in this match, so be ready." And it didn't happen. She never got in. She was at the end of the bench. The team gave a great fight. Like we were really close to beating a team that was seated higher than us. And I finished with the team. I'm super proud of you guys. Great fight. We're on to the next. I turned around and there was a parent in my face, like literally right there, to the point where the girls got scared. I wasn't ready for that, and thankfully in that moment, I just said, hey, we've got a 24-hour rule. We can talk in 24 hours. I'm happy to talk to you. And he kept going. And that was challenging. And I don't know where, but I found my grown up pants and I said, hey, you know what? I'm going to walk away right now and you need to do the same. But it was heavy because I'm very protective of my kids that are on my roster. And even though he was fighting for his daughter, like the girls were getting impacted by it. And it was a tough moment. And thankfully he calmed down. We went our opposite ways and we were able to talk in 24 hours and with much cooler heads. But I guess the biggest thing that I wasn't fully prepared for was that customer service piece. And it's always there. And you
Well,
know what? It doesn't go away in college. I'll tell you
no,
that.
and I love that you brought that up because I was just sharing. I had a coaching colleague in the office and his son, and we were talking about their current situation. And I was explaining as the AD, 90% of my issues this year, which is
Yep.
like the
Yep.
four kids and families that had a concern, comes down to what you just said, communication. And
Yep.
often it comes down to former college athletes and coaches unintentionally feeling as if the 14 to 16 year olds on this campus should be able to self advocate like an adult. And
Yep.
part of our job is to teach them to do that. And part of our job, my basketball coach explained it pretty well the other day, where it's like you forget that sometimes you have to come down the ladder to bring them to you
Correct.
rather than expecting them to come to you. And had you at that moment with that kid and that family had more regular communication, not just about, hey, I want to get you in, but here's your current role. Here's what
Yep.
I need you to do. We're striving for this. And there are some games I'm going to play you and some games that I'm not. And ultimately, you need to understand that's your current role. And I think that's the hardest thing to do as a coach when you have the kid in the back of the bus who's singing and rapping and all looks good, but
Yep.
then you don't know what they're carrying behind the
Oh
scenes
yeah.
because
Oh
they're
yeah.
not talking to you about it. Talk a little bit
Yep.
about your experiences of that, especially you said it doesn't go away at the college level.
So the next year I had 11 on my roster. I needed a 12th. Director said, "Hey, there's this kid that, good athlete. She's a skier. She wants to play. She'd love to play for you." And learning my lessons from the season before, I definitely told her, like, "Hey, here's where you're at. Here's where I think I can get you. Here's what I need you to do during practice. Here's what it's going to be when we go to Spokane, Washington, which is a big trip, which is an expensive trip. Here's what I think you can expect." And I had that conversation with her and I had that conversation with her parents. And I was always, you talk about coming down the ladder. I love that because that does, you're right. It helps kids advocate when they know how to advocate. And when you can draw it out a little bit, I think it's more effective. Now, every year at my banquets, I always have a kid that makes me like bawl and cry and become just a blubbering mess because they have struck a chord with me emotionally. And this kid was that kid. She did everything I asked of her. She never complained. She got into games, and a lot of kids will get into games, and that's like their glory moment. So they're going to go and swing and they're going to do everything that they want to do. I could have her by me. I could say, "Hey, here's what you're going to do. You're going to get a set and you're going to swing high line because that's where the kill is." And then I'd walk away and she'd go and do that. And it was just beautiful. But I don't think that I would have been able to have as good of an impact, or we would have had as good of an interaction had I not gone through those experiences before where I wasn't fully communicative. Now, going to the college game, yeah, there are still kids that they get better at advocating for themselves, but they also get worse at advocating for themselves because they drop it in really quick and don't really follow through with it. "Coach, why am I not playing?" Like, dude, that's a nice way to start a conversation. Let's figure this out. Let's find those little things. As the technically the third assistant, I always took my role as being making sure that I saw those little moments where I'm like, "Hey, what you did today," grab them at the end of practice. Like, "What you did today, that's how you work your way towards the court. You don't do it by dropping in little comments when you walk past a coach. You do it by showing effort on the court." And my job was to make sure that they understood that and they could see those moments. So then they come by you later and like, "How was that?" And I'm like, "Dude, that was great." And so just little things where they just get more and more confidence. But that's a big coaching trap, is to fall into, if they're barking at you, you're going to bark back. No, you got to help them. You got to help them see that's not right.
Yeah. I also think it's interesting, the whatever was going on in my mind while you said that was Why am I not playing? Okay, let's have a conversation about that. And you do more of this, that's how you find the court. But volleyball, I think it's closer to football than it is to basketball in regards to there's very position specific things that you're looking for. And like basketball is a little more fluid. People can move around and play different positions, right? But it's okay. What do I need to do to play more? You need Jenny to graduate because you're not playing more until they're not here. Or you have to go learn a different position and be better than the person that's there. But in your 30 years of experience, when have you ever heard somebody say that? Like, you're not playing. Like my son, who plays football, basketball, lacrosse, he's the quarterback on a JV football team,
Yep.
going to be a sophomore. And we get these questions, hey, you're going to try to play varsity next year, this, that, and the other thing. The starter's a senior. Like, he ain't coming out. So
He's not
you're
going anywhere.
burning a year on that team unless you can start somewhere else. And it's you play safety, and the safety's going to play college football, so you're not playing there. So you're going to play JV. And it's as a coach, I can see that. I can understand that. But as a normal parent, I don't know that I can read the room. So when have you ever seen that? When have you not? Do you think that would be valuable? What did you take out of your psychology courses this year that maybe speaks to any of this?
We had a 6'9" opposite from Turkey in front of this kid. Okay, that's the guy you got to work through. Now, I'll give the guy credit. He kept working like right up until the end of the season when he got some good time in big matches, and he worked through that process pretty well and was physical and did a really nice job. But it is a difficult progression for them to see, especially in men's college at the NC2A level. There are six substitutions. And once you go in and you come out, you're done. You
So it's
can't
not
go
like high school where you can go through on every rotation.
in high school. I think the number of substitutions is like 18 to definitely try and produce a good rotation in and out and get a lot of kids going. Yeah, if you come in for me and then you go out again, you're done. It's like baseball.
It's like baseball. I never knew that. That's wild.
Yeah, you're
So then
scratched.
part of your conversation is actually, hopefully, because I bet you this isn't talked about enough, because this is part of the issue that I had this year was actually at baseball, where it's like, you can pitch. We have to save you. We can't burn you as a pinch runner.
Right.
Until you have that conversation, the kids just, I don't get it. And so I didn't know that. That's wild.
Yeah, so those are tough realizations and tough conversations. A lot of times the bigger conversations are happening with the head coach there because he's gone through it more and he's just more experienced at delivering those messages. But we're right there with him, and then our job is to help keep him going, keep him developing, make sure that even though the big 6'9" guy's there, you have to coach the other kid like he's gonna be the starter because he's an ankle away from getting in the game.
I also think the landscape has shifted in the last 10 years where the proverbial delayed gratification went out the window, right? Where we were in college, Davis was really good at basketball because we redshirted all of our freshmen.
Yep.
And then you hope that you're in the rotation as a sophomore. So you're not even getting in the rotation until your third year. And now
Yep.
it's if I'm not playing right now, I'm being wronged.
Yep. Yep. Coaches are recruiting new kids, right? Class of 2025, they're recruiting kids out of the portal, and then they're recruiting on their own team to keep everybody there, keep everybody happy, keep everybody focused on what's coming and what the future holds for them.
Yeah, it's a fascinating time. On that note, what do you think's the best thing that you do in your program that were you to go somewhere else would come with you because it has such a large ripple effect on culture? And by this, the club stuff you coached, the
Yeah.
schools in Idaho, when you were helping at Menlo, what are the things you saw that were like, yo, this is transformational, and any program I'm involved with, I'm trying to implement this?
So the biggest thing that I took from club into Menlo, and we used it a little bit because I was the new guy, but it had a huge effect in club, and you could see it happening in college, was establishing standards in practice and not slamming a ball down and getting pissed and chucking a chair and all that stuff. If you establish the standards early, meaning, all right, we just had this drill, we just did the butterfly drill, and gosh, that was so sharp. and you try to get out of the kids what was so good about that. And especially the younger kids will give you more, but also my 18s gave it to me, and the college kids would give it to me. What did we do then? We were talking, we were hustling, we were doing this, we were doing that. Okay, there's our standard right now. So then when it comes time to do that drill again, instead of you getting all spun up and angry, it just is a simple, hey, come here. Are we at our standard? And you hope that you've gotten to a moment where they can recognize, and you hope you don't do it too soon where they go, oh, yeah, we're at our standard. We're doing great. And you have to say, no, we're not. But most of the time they'll say, no, we're not. And for me, that's been really transformational because it puts it on the kids. It puts it on them. It gives them ownership of it too, because then you apply it in matches. Then you apply it in practice, you apply it to warm up, you apply it to everything. And they get it. And if you have, depending on the makeup of your team, like last year in club, I had a girl who's playing at the University of Utah that I could go by her. I could see her getting frustrated with the level of effort at practice. And I could just go by and say, hey, get them up to standard. Let's go. And she got that. And so you can use it in a bunch of different ways. Use it as a group, use it individually, use it as a development tool for her to be able to go to the team and say, hey, look. And she has to also go make sure that she's using language that gets people inspired and gets them going. But with the boys, it's definitely worked at the college level and definitely seen pretty immediate results with it. And it's super simple, and it really takes it out of you. It makes it easier on you because you can just ask that simple question. And if they're bought in, they're going to change and they're going to make it better.
Yes, and a little bit of pushback. The
Please.
idea of communication, of hustle, you threw another word in there, is very nebulous, like the word culture. So, how do
Okay.
you articulate? How do you measure that in order to hold them accountable? Because it's very subjective. So, especially the idea of you're not communicating. Well, cool. What does that actually
100%.
look
Yeah.
like? So, talk a little bit about how you cross that bridge, so to speak, when it is pretty nebulous.
So crossing that bridge, usually it becomes an energy thing in terms of them chatting, making a bunch of chatter and using the term like, hey, this does not sound like an NC2A gym, meaning this is dead quiet. You go to any NC2A gym, it's loud, it's happening. So they can measure themselves against that. The 18s, they could measure themselves that I want to get there. So they could really measure themselves against that. Really, it comes down to an energy thing. Just like you can see it in the drill. If they're sharp, like basketball, the passes are crisp, everything's sharp. They're crashing the boards. In volleyball, they're covering and then they're going back to defense. Volleyball's a big dance. Are they doing that stuff, or are they setting the ball and the setter's just sitting there watching? Is the middle going up or running a route, not getting set and just turning and watching? Or is she turning and is she going? So yeah, you can throw out like, hey, we got to hustle. Hey, we got to go. But if you got to point to definite, like certain things, and you can stop a drill and say, hey, that rep was awesome. And a lot of times it comes down to asking them like, why do you think that was so good? This is what we did. We hit our assignments. And then in matches too, hey, that's our standard of competition right now. We might have lost 25-22, but 25-22 is very different than 25-16. So that's our standard. That's how we have to fight. That's what we have to do.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. I think it's just such a hard thing to measure, right? And the cleaner you can drill down on the expectation, right? It's easier to hit. And that's the hard thing about talking energy, hustle, right? It's certain things where, like basketball, like you're diving for every loose ball or you're not playing hard enough, right? There are certain
Right.
things that you can measure, and then there are certain things you can't. I'm now more curious as you talk about it, right? Assistant, head coach, assistant,
Yeah.
club head coach, assistant, college assistant. What have you learned about perspective and how should I say this? The way in which you can most help and or hinder a team depending on which one of those seats you're in, right? Where
Yeah.
I've often joked with my assistants like, look, I need you to make 99 suggestions and get told no and still make the 100th one and not be offended. And then I think ultimately as the head coach, being an assistant in between and learning, hey, there's resources here. How do I use them? So ultimately,
Yep.
give me a little perspective on what you've learned being in and out of different seats over the last few years.
A lot. When to open my mouth and when to not. Going into this, let's see, I want to answer this in a good way. We can start with this year. This year, going in as the third assistant. Grad assistants are usually, they played last year, right? So they don't have much of that coaching experience. So I brought in some knowledge into the job. But even then, I was still like, hey, I was just coaching girls' club. And if I come in here and beat my chest too much or do different stuff, they're going to see that's not genuine. So I was able to sit back a little bit at the beginning until we lost our real assistant. And then we had to rehire another one. So I got given a bigger role, but it taught me to really show up and be genuine about what I was doing, make sure that I was listening to the players, making sure that I was understanding where the head coach wanted to go, and not, you get asked by a player, you get asked something. And at first I was afraid to say, I don't know, because I wanted to be sure that what I was saying was aligned with what the coach was saying. I didn't want any sort of things to go wrong in that sense. So just making sure that they knew that I was there to help them. They knew that I was genuine, and they knew that I was aligned with what what coach was saying, what Todd was saying. And we've been able to do that. And then Todd eventually, to his credit, gave me more rope and gave me more rope. And the boys started to really follow what I was saying, but I had to earn it. I had to understand my role. So I guess going from girls club to men's NC2A, I had to be patient. I had to sit back. I had to be patient, be genuine, and just show up for the boys. Just show them, just demonstrate that I knew what I was doing, but also that I was there to help them.
And now, were you to go head coach something else again, how does the experience as an assistant inform that?
You talk about the 15% coaching and the 85% other. Yeah, that's, I'd probably push back a little bit on that and say it maybe goes to about 10% and 90, especially when you get up to the college level. And these are even bigger decisions that they're making. It would, I've gone back to school because I don't want to stop learning. I'm always learning with this coaching thing. And I've definitely learned that if I stop learning, I'm going to get too stuck in my ways, and the game's evolving, kids are evolving, everything's evolving. So just making sure that I'm buying into staying educated and continue to learn. If I was to go back to head coaching, yeah, the headache of the of that 90% is real. It's tough. It's a lot. That's a thing that we signed up for.
Yeah, no doubt. Given your exposure to different elements, right? You've coached some high level kids. You've probably been around a
Yep.
bunch of college stuff. You've been around high school
Yep.
stuff. You've been around club. I don't know how much exposure you have to other sports, but I am the antithesis of sports specialization. And I'm always curious
Okay.
how people are looking outside of their tunnel and their echo chamber to grow. So I'm curious what you've learned watching other teams that aren't necessarily volleyball per se,
Yep.
that you've been able to apply to your volleyball coaching career.
So I think you asked that question on one of your episodes, and I stopped and I thought about that for a while. And I do. I love to listen to coaches speak. In my house, if the Warriors are playing and Steve Kerr, they zoom in on him in a huddle, like everything stops in the house because I want to hear what he's saying and how he's talking to players. I guess that's the biggest thing, is understanding how coaches talk to their players. So Steve Kerr talks a lot about intention and execution. Hey, your intentions are great, your execution's not there. I love that. That's better than saying, Justin, you're really screwing up right now. Hey, Justin, I love your thoughts right now. We're good. We just need to up that execution a little bit. Studying how coaches speak to their athletes in different drills. I love it. I get on the Instagram and get down some of those holes, and basketball drills come up, and just hearing how they talk about spacing, because I'm all about spacing as well. I'm all about trying to make sure that when I'm trying to find holes in their defense. Most of the time, we can run four hitters against three. It's basketball. It's trying to find a good lane. It's football, trying to find a good, when the end zone camera shines down and you're looking at a trap and you see that hole open, like that's the same thing that we're doing. We're running people this way, and then we're setting it this way, and we're creating those holes. And it's fun to talk about in film because I can talk about it in that way. Look, we can drive right through here because it's going to be open for us. Looking at other sports, yes, there's always something. Tennis, there's a guy who talks about the arm swing and the difference of bringing a hand through like this versus bringing it through with a little bit of a whip. We're the
Mhm.
same. with the same type of swing. So that becomes a language piece that I can then go and talk to players with.
Yeah, and that's why I always ask that, right? I think my boys' basketball head coach and I were in the office yesterday watching water polo practice, and
Yep.
he made an observation, and the pool's right outside my office. I get to watch them every day, swim
Yeah.
season, water polo season, and he made an observation that had never even clicked with me before, and I was like, that's why I try to do this. And now
Yep.
I'm racking my brain trying to remember what it was, but he's coming by later, so I'm going to get it. But it's like there's a million opportunities to learn things and how to maybe approach something that I've struggled with if I
Yep.
get outside the box. And that's the hard thing, right? So I love.
That's a hard thing. The hard thing is to get outside the box and just go, you know what? I don't know is fine to say. And if you say I don't know, then you're going to be curious to go and learn. You're going to be curious to, you're going to at least be you're gonna at least be open. If you like stood there and you stared down that water polo match and you're like, I gotta find something, I gotta find something, you're not gonna find anything. But if you go by and you see a switch on defense or you see a fast break thing in water polo, you're like, wait, I could pull that off
Yep.
in my sport.
No doubt. No doubt.
For
Okay.
sure.
Let me ask this because you've had a bunch of different experiences, and
Yep.
obviously getting hurt was probably very informative to your coaching career. But what is it, if you have something that's specific, great. If it's more conceptual, awesome as well. But I'm always curious about how to fail forward, right? So, what failures we've had in our life that have informed the rest of our career that has allowed us to be successful. I'm curious if you have any stories around that.
So the breaking of the leg definitely gave me the perspective that things happen for a reason. During that time, you couldn't have told me that. It took a long time of reflection, a long time of living to understand that lesson fully. But understanding that there is a purpose to a lot of these things, that's definitely helped me. Going back to the kid whose dad was on the court with me, yeah, it was a failure on my part because I didn't do a good enough of a job of talking to that kid, helping the parents understand, helping everybody on the roster understand. And failing forward is learning. You got to learn, you got to figure it out from there. And you got to not be so dug in and say, yeah, I was right in that regard. I'll never forget. I was working for a film producer back in Idaho, and we were talking about a project, and I ventured to say, I don't think that the other side would want to do that. And the looks on their faces were like, how could you go against what we're doing? And I'm like, I'm not. I'm just simply giving you an example like, hey, they might not want to do that. So then if you carry that to coaching, it's okay, if I ask this kid to do that, they might feel this. So just understanding that there are two sides has definitely helped me. And that's come from making a lot of mistakes and making a lot of failure.
So, on that note, one of the things that I have found that's important at this point in my life is how are we inviting dissenting voice into the equation purposefully with intentionality to challenge our beliefs. So, how have you seen that play out? Where have you seen some gaps in that, but ways in which you've figured out how valuable that question is and the way to deliver it so that it's received in the spirit it's intended?
10,000 hours of not being in the classroom and then going back. That'd be the first one. And if I went in with a mindset of either I know all this or what am I really doing here, it wouldn't have let me be open to learning and open to understanding. That just being open is such a big thing, and it's not easy. And it's not easy to challenge yourself. Oh, we lost this match. Oh, it's just because of the players. No, you need to really dive in and go. There have been several times with with coach now that I've said, "Hey, I don't think our offensive game plan was good enough, and here's why." And that's all on me. That's my plan.
No doubt. That makes sense. So, I'm really curious. You got a year under your belt in your master's program.
Yeah.
What classroom slash curricular learnings have you been able to apply like straight out of the program where it was like maybe they gave you language that was helpful, maybe it was conceptual, but I'm always curious. You're getting this master's in sports psychology essentially. It's what was transferable like right off the jump.
I had a kid come to me after our match with Stanford at home, and this kid was very, very fired up for the whole match. And it was like, it was too much. And they talk about it an arousal curve in sports. This side, you're too chill. There's an optimal zone right in the middle. And then there's too much. And literally, it was a class where we had talked about it either a day before. And then that day we had talked about breathing. And just, I've always studied breathing. And I think it's really cool because I'm a CrossFit coach as well. And so that's a piece of it. But getting in the classroom and learning more about it. And I was literally able to talk to the athlete that night, very high level. I'm not going to fix you right now, but here's what I see is happening. And that kid made a switch both on just being more chill and then breathing. He went from the beginning of the year, like he'd take the ball and he'd walk back behind the serve and he'd go and rip it. And then after that night, he changed to gets the ball, he stops before the end line, and then he crosses over into the service area. And this kid went from versus those Stanford matches, I think hitting just under 200 to the last match of the year against Stanford, he hit 450. So it's just like it's just a simple psychological, it's more an awareness piece for him, but that was something that I could immediately apply and I could immediately go into and give to him. So yeah, so there's a lot. And then next year becomes more of the actual, I'm going to get attached with the softball team as well, do some time with them. And then obviously still be with the men's volleyball team, but more field work next year with a professor, which will be just fascinating because I have so many questions.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to figure out what you're going to learn there. All right, let me wrap up with this.
Yes, sir.
Because you're back in the class, I'm learning. I'm in
Yeah,
growth mindset mode.
yeah,
And we live in a time where the polarization basically doesn't allow us to consider opposing viewpoints,
right.
unfortunately. But I'm always curious about ways in which we are purposefully challenging our beliefs. So, what's something that you've recently changed your mind on? And it doesn't have to be sports specific. But look, man, I used to be dug in here and you were never getting me off this ledge. And actually, now I'm over here, and here's why.
I was pretty convinced when I went into Menlo that the men's college game was going to be so much different than the girls' high school game and the girls' club game, and that the athletes were going to be different. But the athletes were pretty similar in the sense that they want to be heard, they want to be respected, they want to be. I had the boys would tell me, "Hey, coach, watch this." Like literally, they just want to be recognized and they want to be know that you're there for them. And the girls' side, I was definitely that was something that I took a lot of pride in, and to be able to go from being terrified and scared and not really believing in the boys that they could get in touch with that side to seeing this whole season go through and understanding that was a pretty big deal for me to go, okay, this can happen.
Love that. All right, I lied. We're not going to end on that because you just brought up something I'm curious about. Coaching males and females is different.
Yeah.
Whether people want to believe it or not, it's just different. Not better, not worse, different.
Yeah.
What would you be able to articulate at this point, now that you've had this real shift, that is different, and how you would approach that for people that are out there listening that are maybe going from the boys' side to the girls' side, the girls' side to the boys' side, anywhere in between? Because my first stint as the girls' coach was not emotionally fulfilling at all. Now that
Okay.
I'm back doing it, I love it. But I had to get my mind right to be able to do it. So I'm curious what your take on that is and what advice you have for others.
Make sure that your filters on and you're considering your audience. Make sure that you know that going to the end of the bench and Justin just came out of the match and I'm yelling at Justin and I'm telling you, you got to do better at this part is not going to be received as well as maybe it's if Annie's at the end of the bench. And that's nothing to do with men and women. It's just a different tact you have to take. But at the same time, like you have to go and understand that if I tell Justin, you're screwing up, this is horrible, Justin's going to process that pretty badly too. He might get a little bit fired up and he might improve, but it's also that's going to hit him. So I think that transformation is just understanding that you do need to craft your message well and you're going to make mistakes, but make sure that you're tailoring that message to whoever's in front of you and be genuine.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest thing, especially when you're starting, is the feeling that you have to do things one way and always that way for everyone on your team. And
Yeah,
one of the things I've learned in the last 20 years is look, fair is not equal. And
right.
I'm gonna be consistent in that I'm gonna treat everybody inconsistently. And it's like, how do you do that within your own authenticity?
And I find that with the men's team, there are moments where I want to go console somebody, or at the same time, it's not the time. No, it's okay. Like we got a job to do. And so that does come in. That might take a little bit of adjustment if I make it back towards the girls' game. But there are times where you just need to leave them. Hey, you got to figure that out, kid.
No doubt, no doubt. Coach, I appreciate you taking the time. This has been fun. I'm looking forward to catching up after year two to see
Thank you.
what you learned and what you can share.
Absolutely.
All
Thanks
right.
for having me.